requested in our invitation. We have also provided you with a WhatsApp number, which is 073-241-0315, in case you still have more questions. Also, after the Commissioner has spoken, you'll have another additional opportunity to raise your questions. When you are given the indication, please state who you are and from which organization you come from, and then your question. Now I hand over to the Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Bungiwe, and allow me also to introduce my colleague, Mr. Johnson Makubu, who is our Chief Revenue Officer. I think I'm going to remove this now and put on something which may look funny, but is safe for all of us. So hopefully you will still be able to focus on the address, not necessarily on my fashion statement. At the outset, I'd like to apologize for the length of the presentation today, but we have quite a lot to share with you, members of the media, as well as with the public. So let me just say that the topics we want to cover today includes, firstly, the South African Revenue Service response to the current COVID-19 challenges, covering our working arrangements, as well as an update on revenue management. Then secondly, I would like to give you some detail around the personal income tax filing season for this current year. And then thirdly, you may have forgotten, it sounds like such a long time ago, but I have just celebrated my 1-year anniversary at SARS, and I would like to give you a quick reflection of my first year since my appointment on the 1st of May 2020. So, good afternoon, and welcome to our media briefing. You know, so much has changed during the past 2.5 months to bring to a culmination a year that was already characterized with so many challenges ahead of COVID-19 and the investment downgrade by the ratings agencies. We've already had 5 weeks into the new financial year, and the harsh reality is beginning to emerge as government is trying to balance the health and mortality outcomes on the one hand with the very necessary social and economic challenges on the other. I'd like to start with our current challenges as presented by COVID-19, in particular, how it has impacted on our work arrangements, as well as our initial sense of the impact on revenue collections. Let me turn firstly to our working arrangements under COVID-19. The world, South Africa, and specifically institutions such as South African Revenue Service, or SARS, are facing unprecedented challenges, and we literally find ourselves in uncharted waters. But at the outset, let me say that being in uncharted waters does not mean that you proceed without a plan. It simply means you proceed with utmost caution, you use the best evidence available, you remain open to new information, and most importantly, you demonstrate genuine humility, the eagerness to learn, and the agility to adapt your approach as the situation evolves. And we have to say, we do not understand everything about this coronavirus, as invisible as it is, and therefore we are all on a learning curve. Under the disaster management regulations, the SARS Commissioner is authorized to determine which SARS services are considered essential. Many have asked me why SARS is essential during this time. Well, if there was ever a time where delivering on our mandate matters, that time is now. More than ever before, government needs tax revenues to provide the much needed relief to businesses and individuals, and especially to keep an army of community health workers and other medical and frontline workers employed. The current economic environment is already constrained as it is. Secondly, many businesses and individuals are desperately in need of refunds that are payable, and this requires SARS to perform the necessary verification and assurance work, and to manage the risks related to refunds. Sadly, we are still dealing with abuse in the refund system, where many taxpayers enter the system with no other reason but to defraud the system, and we have to be guarded to protect your interest as honest taxpayers. Our customs officials have had to ensure that the essential and legitimate personal protective equipment, medical equipment and supplies, as well as other permitted cargo, be lawfully facilitated through our ports of entry. And fourthly, we have had to also prepare our core systems in preparation for administering all the tax relief measures announced by government. And that in itself was quite a formidable piece of work under very trying circumstances. During this time, it remains extremely important for all taxpayers to remain compliant. And I make this appeal to all taxpayers and traders, individuals, as well as their practitioners and intermediaries. Compliance more than any time before matters, for the reasons I've outlined before. What does this mean? It means that you register when you are legally required to register. You submit tax and customs declarations, returns, and the relevant submissions when it is required. And you make the necessary payments when it becomes due, unless you have entered into a permissible payment arrangement with SARS. COVID-19 has meant that we review the way we work. I'd like to share with South Africans that we have had to balance the essential mandate that I've just shared with you, and as I have set out, with the risk to our employees and as well as taxpayers, traders and practitioners, to make sure that we do not place them at risk of contracting the virus. So what have we done to reconfigure our work? Firstly, we have stepped up our efforts to convert more taxpayers to our digital offerings, and I'll give you more detail about that in a moment. And secondly, we have modified our operational rhythm towards what we call a new normal. I deal with each of these in turn. Firstly, we are using the crisis of COVID in a positive and constructive way. You may remember that we have announced a Vision 2024, which commits us to building a smart, modern SARS with unquestionable integrity, trusted and admired. We've decided to use this crisis to step up our work towards this vision. I'm pleased to share that our technology and data management teams have worked tirelessly and added 30 additional functionalities to our digital offerings, including, amongst others, an automated registration system for personal income tax earners. Almost 6,000 registrations have already taken place. Secondly, we have automated a notice of registration for VAT, which is now available on e-filing, allowing VAT vendors to view, print, or save their notices of registration. And again here, almost 5,000 individuals and traders have used this facility. Thirdly, taxpayers may use the enhanced filing system to check their compliance status, to review their registration details, to complete proof of registration, as well as to obtain a statement of account for both individuals and businesses. Fourthly, non-filers can now submit supporting documents via the web to reduce the need to come to our offices. And I'm pleased to say that over 1,200 submissions have already been received via this medium to date. Fifthly, we have suspended the need for VAT interviews as a pre-registration requirement and moved it to a post-registration requirement. And again, almost 3,000 taxpayers have taken up this offering. Sixthly, we have developed a streamlined banking details verification process by using enhanced data matching and artificial intelligence-based verification. And here, again, I am pleased that almost 15,000 individuals have already used this facility. Seventh, we have enhanced the process for online tax directives, where individuals or their practitioners may apply for their tax directives via e-filing. Number 8, We have integrated our email system with our automated case management system for the first time, and this allows taxpayers, as an exception, to send queries via the email, and this allows many of our staff working from home to resolve taxpayer queries. And again, almost 5,000 taxpayers have already used this resolution medium. Ninth, we've introduced an online appointment system for those taxpayers and tax practitioners who remain insistent and or are unable to convert to our digital offerings. We'll continue to coach them, but in the end, some may not make this shift. And so an online appointment system then allows them to come via an appointment system, and therefore we avoid the unnecessary long queues at our branches, and in this way support public health and social distancing measures. And then 10th, we have enhanced our website and will continue to enhance this with enabling information, frequently answered questions to assist taxpayers, traders and practitioners. And we have had 1.34 million hits, of which over 80,000 were COVID-19 related. And then the last two is we are currently redesigning our website to enhance navigation and functionality, and we will align this to our refreshed branding, which we will launch very shortly, so watch this space. We will also announce additional enhancements as they are completed, because this is an ongoing and real-time exercise that I share with you. Then the second area I want to cover, in response to lockdown regulations, we have also had to modify our work arrangements. As I said, we are converting as many as possible taxpayers to interface with us digitally. In terms of our own arrangements, we have introduced 4 organizational arrangements to improve our efficiency. Firstly, we have stepped up regular communication to our employees using multiple medium channels, including personal letters and fireside chats from myself, as the situation evolves, in order to raise awareness of COVID-19, inform our employees of work arrangements, and generally just to remain in touch and provide them with clarity and the ongoing assurance, and also to affirm the big idea that SARS exists to serve the higher purpose of providing our government with the financial resources to take care of the well-being of all South Africans, and to remind them that we do a privileged work. Secondly, the second arrangement is we have also proactively engaged with leadership of organized labor to create the opportunity for them to obtain clarity directly from us, and this empowers them to understand the new workplace arrangements and to give us regular feedback where teething problems or employee concerns manifest, as they would during times of accelerated learning. We also enjoy the goodwill of our labor colleagues. Thirdly, we have established an operations bridge to coordinate daily activities and ensure the appropriate balance between taxpayer demands on the one hand and our capacity to respond on the other hand. And in that way, we ensure a consistent operational rhythm across the organization, and we are actively involved in supporting managers in the front line, those who actually face the taxpayers on a day-to-day basis. And then fourth arrangement is we have introduced a daily operational check-in to remain agile and responsive to a rapidly emerging new normal, and support our staff with the necessary orientation, with training and guidance and other support that enables them to serve our taxpayers. And then in support of that, we've also launched a number of focused work streams where design and enabling and support teams continuously look at reconfiguring and recalibrating our operational platform, as well as adjusting our policies and standard operating procedures in support of this evolving new normal. And then we've also constituted an active COVID-19 task team led by our able mistress or MC, Director of Programs, and that helps us to stay in touch with the regulations, survey international best practices, and to continuously assess our workplace readiness and advise the Commissioner. In addition, we also have allowed most of our employees not on leave to work from home in order that SARS may honor the letter and the spirit of the lockdown whilst continuing to serve taxpayers and support our mandate. We've introduced a rotation schedule to initially reduce staffing levels at our contact centers to a third of normal levels, and slowly, as we became more prepared, we've increased that in line with our ability to implement social distancing measures. We've also used our contact centers to coach and assist taxpayers, traders, and practitioners to convert to our digital offerings as we encourage them increasingly to go online. And then we've limited visits to our branches to an appointment basis only, and only staff up to respond to the confirmed appointments. And you can either phone our contact centers or log onto our website to make we have created an online appointment system for ease of use. Then we've also, for employees at home, we have provided two pieces of technology. Those who have access to email and additional data, because connectivity these days and all the Zoom meetings and other chats, data is obviously gold. In this case, connectivity, and therefore we're allowing our employees at home access to emails. And to those employees who require access to our core systems, we provide them with a secure access via our virtual private network, so that these have a higher level of security. Then, on a demand basis, where employees are required to physically come to the office, because that's unavoidable, because we need to conduct essential activities, here we institute strict public health measures as directed by the Ministry of Health, and more recently, occupational health measures by the Department of Labour. I can also share with you, we've already had 3 visits by inspectors from the department to various of our offices, and they have found our offices to be compliant, and we would like to give the assurance to taxpayers and our employees we will continue to work on ensuring that the highest standards of public health measures and social distancing measures are enforced while we remain within the confines of the occupational health measures required by the Department of Labour. We've also then, throughout this period, we have reduced our staffing levels. We started at 15% staffing, and then as we built confidence, we increased that to 20%, to 25%. As of last week, we were 30%, and this week we will slowly increase that in line with our readiness to respond to COVID-19, but also with our increasing demand to serve taxpayers and to cope with us delivering the essential components of our mandate. We've also remained agile and responsive to a situation which is rapidly and continuously evolving. Then thirdly, government have also announced a number of tax relief measures. You can find details of this on our website, but maybe just take you into our confidence that we have had to do a significant amount of work to prepare our core administrative systems to ensure the seamless implementation across our organization. And I have to alert you that even during these trying times, there would still be those who seek to abuse and to defraud the system, and SARS have raised its vigilance to ensure that the monies that are meant to go to those in need of the measures indeed receive those measures, and that we eliminate abuse. During this period, SARS also received a number of requests from other government departments for assistance to leverage our data matching and data modeling capabilities, especially to help them improve the integrity of their own systems as they disperse the various relief measures. Refer specifically to the UIF and to the Department of Social Development in the SASSA and COVID relief grants. In terms of trade facilitation, during the lockdown, a number of measures were also put in place to achieve the twin goals of facilitating permissible trade on the one hand, whilst adhering to the safety protocols to protect our frontline customs officers. And these measures include: 1, an automated customs declarations system which allow traders to submit their declarations and permit automated processing to facilitate legitimate trade, whilst minimizing manual interaction between customs officials and traders. Secondly, we've also implemented measures to protect our customs officers, including sanitization of work areas regularly, wearing of protective clothing for our frontline staff who come in contact with risk situations, be that people or cargo, and then increase the use of non-intrusive equipment for physical inspections. Thirdly, we've engaged extensively with stakeholders to clarify lockdown regulations and the applicable relief measures permitted, and also this will be published is already published on our website. And then lastly, for trade facilitation, we have stepped up our interaction with intergovernmental agencies to facilitate the movement of cargo, to avoid congestion at our ports of entry, and to ensure the efficient movement of these goods to and from our neighboring system, who are very often dependent on South Africa for the cross-border trade between our countries. We've also observed ongoing activities in illicit trade activities and have effected a number of detentions and seizures during April. I'll share with you some of that color. We've had 43 detentions during the month of April, and that included everything from masks to cigarettes. We've also had 17 seizures, mainly cigarettes, alcohol, and counterfeit, as well as clothing and footwear. Why do I share this with you? Not necessarily for the revenue impact only, but more importantly, whilst we are in lockdown, the criminal and illicit economic activities, sadly to say, finds the opportunity to thrive under these conditions. Which brings me to the second big event, in addition to our work arrangements, which is revenue management and performance. And all kind of new skills under COVID-19. So as far as tax and customs revenue performance, we have to share with you that it has already and will continue to significantly affect revenue during this period. This is an evolving picture and will be continually refined, but will chiefly be a function of a few things. Firstly, the general state of the South African economy, even ahead of COVID-19 and aggravated by the investment downgrade, we were already struggling in our economy, and that has impacted on revenue as we reported already last year. Secondly, we would like to share with you the cost to the fiscus of the COVID-19 tax relief measures. Thirdly, decisions made by government during the various alert levels will have a direct impact on economic capacity as well as economic activities. And the general impact on the compliance environment will certainly also be affected during this period. So let me deal with each of those in turn. As far as the general state of the South African economy and the impact of the downgrade and COVID-19, last week, National Treasury pointed to a severe global economic crisis that hasn't been seen since the Great Depression. And as part of that, predict a contraction of around 3% for the current year alone in the global economy. Advanced economies bear the brunt of this contraction at 6.1%, and developing economies a contraction of -1%. Sub-Sahara is predicted to contract at 1.6%, and for South Africa, our colleagues in Treasury have developed 3 scenarios which predicts GDP outcomes ranging from -5.4% to -16% just for the current year. And of course, final outcomes will depend on the extent of the pandemic globally and locally a function of lockdown decisions exercised by government as we try to balance the containment of the spread of the virus and managing the health and mortality outcomes on the one side with freeing up economic activity and economic capacity on the other. We concur that there are so many unknowns and indeterminate variables that are confronting all the predictive models, and we will continually update that as we learn and as the situation evolves. We are certainly facing the worst economic performance in recent times, which are aggravated by the structural faults already in our economy. Some of these include the stubborn legacy of spatial and social inequality that has not been addressed since the start of our democracy and has resulted in the stubborn residue of unemployment, of poverty, and other factors that materially impact the quality of life of many of our citizens. Secondly, the unacceptable low levels of labor-intensive growth, aggravating the already high levels of unemployment, and it's predicted that this will worsen in the next period. Poorly performing state-owned monopolies with huge negative impact on state balance sheet and administered prices, which drives unacceptable debt levels, debt service costs, and price inflation. And then, of course, we have a highly concentrated private sector with limited competition and a highly restrictive barriers to entry barriers for new and especially smaller players. So what does this have on revenue performance? Well, whilst it is early days, our initial view is that the revenue performance will be lower than the February budget announcement by between 15 and 20%. What does this mean? It means that we could potentially face a revenue under recovery of up to 285 billion. Now, my job is not to revise the revenue estimate. That the Minister of Finance will do when he announces a budget update. But for us, our day job is the mobilization of domestic resources, and so therefore we point this out as a huge revenue risk. We've just had 1 month, and so from the preliminary assessment of revenue performance, I can share with you the following. That we have had an under-recovery in the first month of 9 billion, which represents a year-on-year decline of 8.8%. The main drivers of this under-recovery are as follows. For pay-as-you-earn, we are down 5.2% compared to the same period prior year. This is made up of just over 65,000 employers who have made payments in April 2019 but have made no payments in the corresponding month of 2020, a tax value of 3.8 billion. There's also just over 87,000 employers who have made payments in April 2019 but have made lower payments in the corresponding month of 2020 with a tax value of 6.1 billion. As far as domestic VAT is concerned, we also have seen the number of vendors who have filed and paid decrease by 13% from 160,136 vendors in April 2019 to 139,313 vendors in the corresponding month this year. And that has led to a downward trend year-on-year of 4.3% in VAT. Of the 139,000 vendors paid last year, only 75% of them are repeat payers, which means they also paid in the prior year. And collections from the 75% of vendors that paid in both years contracted by 200 million rand. And this signifies a continued strain that we will bear on the core taxes in our economy. And then year-on-year monthly payments from those who have filed decreased by 20%, which has a tax value of 1.1 billion rand. When we get to import taxes, the overall performance is down by 19.7%, and that has two components. The first component is import VAT, which is down 25%, a tax value of 1.6 billion, and customs duty, which is down by 11.8%, or a customs tax value of 100 million. Customs duty down 11.8% and a tax value of 100 million. As far as specific excise duties, the one that you're all interested in, we are down on prior year by 54.7%. The tax value is relatively low in comparison with our overall tax take, which is down by 1.3 billion, and that is made up of 1.7 billion lower on alcohol and cigarettes, and offset by a 400 million upward correction on fuel levy. And we've already had a number of requests for payment deferrals from players in these areas of production. I must raise this as a concern. We naturally enforce and apply the regulations that are decided ultimately by Cabinet. So we raise this from a revenue collection and a revenue capacity perspective. And so as far as that's concerned, what we really raise is the current investigating non-compliance, the extent to which it is simply fueling illicit and criminal activities, which is a key concern of ours. And so this is really the reason we raise it, because we know, as previously shared with South Africa, this is a growing concern in a climate where we're already struggling to collect the revenues that are due. The next item is corporate taxes, and that is down on prior year by 55%. I must add that April is not a significant month for corporate taxes, but the early indication is that this downward spiral will continue and will be reflected throughout the economy, except in areas such as electricity, gas and water, and areas that have continued to be active during this period. We expect the number of companies who will apply for business rescue will continue to grow in this current year. And then, as far as VAT refunds are concerned, there we are down 12.5%, lower than estimate, and that is simply a reflection of lower number of credit returns that is also reflecting the contracted economic activities. And so we paid out 15.5 billion of refunds compared to a prior year payout of 17.7 billion. I now want to turn to tax relief measures and share with you the following: that the cost of the COVID relief measures alone is estimated to be 70 billion, arising from tax deferrals, which we have permitted without imposing penalties and interests, as well as the employee tax incentives, which we've expanded and extended the use of, as well as the temporary suspension of the skills development levy. The number 70 billion also includes 5 billion that we have allowed for taxpayers who on a case-by-case basis will be evaluated. Here I have to say that we project that this value will be significantly higher, and we know that because already in the first month we have had a significantly higher number of applicants who have applied for the deferrals. And then I also have to add that this excludes the projection of a decline in general compliance, not necessarily because of dishonest taxpayers, but we project that taxpayers will just be struggling with cash flow, struggling with contracted business activities, and will find themselves unable to pay even the deferred payments during the current year. It may spill into next year, and sadly, in some areas they may not only default in their payments, but they may also experience a demise in their businesses. And this is a significant concern because this then takes out productive capacity in the economy. Which leads me to the next item, which is the impact on the economic capacity due to COVID-19 and lockdown, and this is clearly a matter that directly impacts on the administration of our mandate. So a major concern that we have from a revenue perspective is not only a downward trend in economic activities, but really that a loss of economic capacity, which will result from businesses closing down and from jobs that are losses, and many of these businesses and jobs will not return. The full impact of this will bear out over the next few months, but will also depend on how we manage the lockdown and phase in economic activities. Many businesses will not be able to operate profitably at the reduced capacity. Even though they may be permitted to operate, they may not be able to operate profitably, and therefore they will just not open. We've anecdotally heard from some restaurants that already the current provision which permits them to provide certain services may still not permit them to do so profitably. And so these are the concerns we share. And for those of you who have started a business from scratch will know how hard it is to start a business. So if you lose a business out of the economy, you don't just replace it in a few months' time. It often takes more than 100 business ventures to be started by entrepreneurs for one to be successful because of the high infant mortality rate of new businesses. And so the economic capacity that we lose out of the economy will have long-term implications for tax revenue collections. And so this is what really keeps us awake for those of us whose day job it is to collect tax revenue. Our initial assessment comes from the following data points. Stats SA recently reported on liquidations and insolvencies that they have seen an increase of 12.3% for February 2020 compared with the same period last year, with an increase of voluntary applications for liquidations. And in insolvencies, they have seen an increase of 13.9% for January this year compared to last year. According to our own directives that we have finalized, we can report that we have seen an increase of 1,622 employees retrenched during April this year compared to last year, which is an increase of 9%. The total number of retrenchments in April is just over 20,000. Stats SA also conducted a perception survey where they targeted VAT-registered businesses with a reference period of 30 March to 13 April 2020, and they reported as follows. 42% of businesses feel they cannot operate throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. 54% of businesses feel that they will not survive between 1 and 3 months. 46.4% of businesses have temporarily closed their doors. Only half of the respondents felt that their workforce would not be affected, which means the other half felt it would be affected. 36.8% businesses expect that they will definitely decrease their workforce, and 20% of businesses surveyed have already laid off staff in the short term. 28% businesses surveyed have also decreased working hours, and 85.4% of businesses surveyed already reported a lower turnover below their normal turnover for the similar period. 2 out of 3 businesses feel that the impact will be worse than the 2008-2009 recession. Of the 707 businesses surveyed, 180 of them were in the manufacturing sector, 71 of them in the trade, 52 of them in the logistics and communications sector, 44 in the real estate and business services sector, and 39 in the construction sector. Now I wish to focus on the upcoming tax filing season. Also a very important aspect of our tax year, and amidst all this COVID-19 focus, we cannot forget that we have certain tax obligations to fulfill. And so more than ever before, I make the appeal again that taxpayers, and in this regard especially employers, and individual taxpayers remain compliant. We will do what we can to facilitate this, to make it easy for you to comply, but you need to bring your part. So what have we done differently this year? We have designed a filing season 2020 for personal taxes with a number of key changes. The first phase, which started on the 15th of April and will continue until the 31st of May 2020, is a phase for employer filing. Compliance by employers in respect of payroll taxes is very important. A renewed focus to ensure that all employers are fully compliant in terms of their filing and their payment obligations, and we expect all employers to fully comply because this ensures a much lower burden of compliance for the employees in respect of their filing obligations. So I now speak to employees, go and harass your bosses to make sure they are compliant, because to the extent that they are compliant, you will get a seamless experience from SARS. But to employers specifically, you are legally appointed as agents of SARS, and we remind you that it is a criminal offense to collect money from your employers in the guise of income taxes and not to pay that over to SARS. And we have found a drop in compliance levels as far as filing and payment obligations from many employers. We also would like to appeal to third-party information providers for them to comply with our request. So in addition to appealing to employers, we also want to appeal to providers of third-party information to fulfill this requirement by the end of May 2020. Why is third-party information important? Because third-party information allows us to use data modeling and artificial intelligence to perform the final assessment of all standard taxpayers and to provide the majority of individual taxpayers with a seamless filing experience. Third-party information providers include employers, banks, financial service companies who administer retirement fund and pension schemes, medical savings and insurance schemes. And in addition to this, SARS also interfaces with the National Population Register, the Companies Register, the Deeds Office, and other asset registers and trading registers to ensure that we expand our data set. And this allows us, firstly, to ensure that honest taxpayers receive a seamless experience, but also gives us the ability to detect non-compliance and to respond to that appropriately. So that's phase one. Phase two, which starts on the 1st of June and extends to the 31st of August 2020, this is the phase for tax file updates. What does this mean? It means that during this period, taxpayers are requested to engage with SARS to ensure that their tax files are up to date. In terms of just general hygiene checks, banking detail updates, address changes, etc. Because we often find that the long queues during filing season are simply to do those hygiene checks, and we ask now that that be done ahead of the filing season so that when you do file, those things are in order. And I'm sure you will understand the value of that downstream. And SARS will provide that functionality mainly online, and you should be able to complete all of that online, and in the exception where you require, you can do so via an appointment at one of our branches. All outstanding third-party information will also, during this phase, second phase, will be followed up and to ensure the highest level of data integrity. Third-party providers, including employers, who remain willfully compliant may face criminal charges during this period. We have in the past not really acted as we ought to on non-compliant employers, and we are resolute this year because of the importance and the downstream impact on your employees to enforce this more rigorously. And then during the second phase, a significant number of taxpayers will receive auto assessments and be given the opportunity to confirm their acceptance of the assessment outcome according to SARS. And if they do so, their obligation for the year will have been fulfilled. During phase 2, individual taxpayers who are required to file but have not been auto-assessed may file early via the online facilities if their employers and other third-party information providers are fully compliant. And we also have to say that compliant employers means that you have filed your 201s, your EMP 201s, you have filed your EMP 501s, which is your 6 monthly, your EMP 201 is your monthly declaration, your EMP 501 is your 6 monthly reconciliation, and your 12 monthly, and then you have paid the monies that you have collected. Where you have not or failed for any reason to pay, we would encourage you to raise this transparently and openly with us ahead of us coming to you so that we can enter into an arrangement. Otherwise, you have broken the law. And then individuals who are not required to file will also be informed during phase 2, and individuals who are required to file during phase 3 will be informed. Which brings me to phase 3 of this year's filing season, which is the 1st of September to the 31st of January, which we call employee filing phase. Here, individuals who are required to file will be reminded. Remember, we would have already informed you, so now we will remind you. Secondly, individuals who are non-provisional taxpayers or have not accepted the outcome of the auto-assessment are required to file as from the 1st of September through to the 16th of November 2020, and you are encouraged to do so using our digital platform to minimize visits to our offices and obviously for your own safety, the safety of our employees in response to the public health and social distancing measures. Thirdly, individuals who are non-provisional taxpayers who make use of our branch facility will have until the 22nd of October 2020 to file. And provisional taxpayers who have not accepted the outcome of the auto-assessment are required to file when they are ready, but not later than the 31st of January 2021. And all of these dates will be posted on our website. As I conclude, I would like to reflect on my first year back at SARS, which now seems like such a long time ago. So much has happened, and even on the other hand, seems like just a blink of an eye. But now it is widely known that SARS has suffered a serious breakdown in governance and integrity, and have suffered a measurable decline in employee morale, a significant damage to its reputation, and an unfortunate loss in public confidence. This was also reflected in a steady decline in revenue performance, levels of compliance, and taxpayer morality. The journey of rebuilding SARS commenced with a review of the integrity and performance of senior leadership. You will know that we suspended the then EXCO while we did that work. Today I can report progress as follows. 1, we have largely addressed issues of leadership integrity. Secondly, we have initiated a program to reimagine and rebuild SARS, consisting of an exciting Vision 2024. Secondly, a SARS revitalized strategic intent, which is based on voluntary compliance. Today we presented to the Parliamentary Committee our 5-year strategic plan, as well as our annual performance plan. I want to point out our annual performance plan will be impacted on and will evolve and updated as a result of COVID-19. In support of our strategic intent, we have 9 strategic objectives, which is also posted, but in summary, it is to provide clarity and certainty to taxpayers and traders of their tax obligations. Secondly, to make it easy for taxpayers and traders to comply and fulfill those obligations. Thirdly, to detect non-compliant taxpayers and traders and make it hard for those who choose not to comply and make it costly. The benefit of non-compliance cannot be more than the cost of non-compliance. Our 4th strategic objective is to develop a high-performing, agile, and engaged workforce that is diverse, reflective of our demography, but also future-proofed as the world of work evolves. Our fifth strategic objective is to expand and increase the use of data, to improve integrity, derive better insights from data, and improve the outcomes using AI as we develop that capability within SARS. Our sixth objective is to modernize our systems continually, as we have done in the last 6 weeks, to provide digital and streamlined services and encourage more of our taxpayers and stakeholders to engage with us digitally. Our seventh one is an important one because we work with other people's money. In fact, we work with your money as taxpayers, and therefore we have set an explicit objective to demonstrate resource stewardship. What this means is we will use the money allocated to us to ensure efficiency, quality outcomes, and performance excellence, and you can hold us accountable for that. Our eighth objective is to work with and through stakeholders to improve the entire tax ecosystem, and our ninth strategic objective is to work hard to earn back and build public confidence and trust in the tax administration system, because this is central to the theory of voluntary compliance. Fourthly, we have organized our work to give effect to the 9 strategic objectives in the following ways. We have organized around 3 clusters. The first cluster is taxpayer engagement, that is our operations, service and delivery cluster. The second is our design and enabling cluster, providing the human technology and data support to enable an efficient service. And the third cluster is enterprise service and support, and that provides us with the material, financial, and legal support and other support that enables us to operate within governance principles and within the confines of the legal mandate with which we are expected to do. We've also introduced a regional structure. We have divided the country into 9 geographic regions and as well as 3 taxpayer segments. The 3 taxpayer segments are the segment for businesses, large and international. The second segment is the individual segment for those individual taxpayers with wealthy, complex arrangements. And the third is a restricted taxpayer segment for high-profile taxpayers so that our entire workforce does not have access to it. We've also, thirdly, revised our leadership, organization, and reporting arrangements. And I'm happy to say, as of 3 weeks ago, we have reconstituted the executive committee of SARS, albeit on an interim basis, until we have completed the recruitment of 29 senior positions that we have advertised, and we will get back to filling now that we have gone through the initial phase of COVID readiness. Fifthly, as part of rebuilding the soft infrastructure, we have also embarked on restoring the so much important higher purpose orientation. Secondly, to rebuild a new leadership system. And thirdly, to build a credible employee engagement program, because our staff is our best resource, our best asset. And unless we engage them, we cannot succeed. The sixth aspect that I want to reflect on is, you know that we have suffered a significant revenue decline, and to enhance revenue performance, we have done 4 things. Firstly, we have created and appointed a Chief Revenue Officer for the first time in our SARS history. I've introduced you earlier to my colleague, who I'm sure will answer some revenue-related questions, Mr. Johnson Makubu, formerly our CFO. Secondly, an explicit focus on revenue from our compliance program. Thirdly, a focused enterprise-wide revenue recovery program. And fourthly, a tax gap study under Judge Davis. We've reconstituted the Davis Tax Committee and will report to you once we have finalized that work with Judge Davis in the next few months. Seventh, rebuilding SARS will require time and consistent efforts. And we ask you to bear with us as we rebuild an institution that can have your respect because we have earned it, and that can be credible because you have judged us to be so. The current challenges presented by COVID-19, the investment downgrade, and the most significant economic contraction in recent times have on the one hand made our jobs just so much harder. But at the same time, we are blessed with a solid foundation, many committed men and women whom I am privileged to work with, and a crisis which we are determined not to waste. We remain committed and inspired to pursue the important work that we are privileged to do. Thank you for attending this media briefing, and we are ready to take questions for those of you who still have not had enough of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the address. There is some specific questions that have come through via email and the WhatsApp group. Generally, Commissioner, the questions that are coming through are around the tax relief measures and specific excise and the performance thereof. I'm just giving a broad view of where the questions are seated. Revenue estimate, refunds, as well as the filing season. Maybe before I go into those questions, I will head back to the program director to make some remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
One, two. Thank you. Now it's on. Thank you so much, the Commissioner for SARS, for that address, and thank you, Johnston. So what you will allow now is for Johnston to start with all the questions that were sent through to us on time through the WhatsApp, and then once you are done with those, then we'll allow for any hands will take your questions up, just in case maybe your question might be covered. Thank you so much, Steny.
Thank you, Bongi. The first set of questions come from Lamiz Omadi from Fin24, and it's quite a number of them, Commissioner, so I'll try and streamline them. The first question is, will this year's revenue estimates or targets be adjusted to account for the COVID-19 tax relief? The second question from Lamiz is, will SARS advocate for some type of higher tax rate in order to overcome the shortfalls that will be caused by COVID-19? And the third question relates to, will tax submission deadlines be moved due to COVID-19? We've just announced some dates for the filing season, and the question is to the effect whether we would consider submission deadlines in as far as the impact of COVID-19 plays itself out. The fourth question, which I will pause on, Commissioner, and maybe give you an opportunity to respond, and I'll add where necessary. What is the status of the track and trace system to be implemented on cigarettes? Has the tender been awarded yet? I think we spoke to this the last time we had a press conference here, and we'll just provide an update as far as that is concerned. Maybe, Commissioner, let me finish off Lamiz's question. The fifth one is, what is Mr. Kieswetter's view on the ratings downgrade, given the pressures that it will now place on the fiscus as well as SARS' ability to collect the required revenues? Is there room for SARS to provide more tax relief than already has been given?
Thank you, Johnson. So if I can, I will answer some of the questions, but if I can ask you specifically to talk on refunds management, and if I can ask the Head of Customs, Mr. Bayers Teron, who is in the room, to come forward later to answer customs relief measures. So let me do a few ones. First, in terms of revenue reprojection, any revision of revenue estimates is beyond my pay grade. We are part of a revenue analysis working group where we work along with our colleagues in National Treasury, the South African Reserve Bank, as well as SARS, and we each contribute our perspective from the vantage point of our work. All of this goes into a rigorous process, and ultimately it is the mandate of National Treasury to make a recommendation to the Minister of Finance, who then finally makes a decision about any adjustment to revenue estimates, as well as any adjustment of tax rates. Once that is made, our day job starts, which is to administer it. In terms of submission deadlines, that is within our scope. We have already, under the tax relief measures, we have created the facility for the deferral of payments. We would like to make the appeal that the actual paperwork, the actual submission of those documents, not slip. Because ultimately that is what protects you when we do the final audit. So what we would say is continue to honor your filing obligations and submit the supporting documents. It is easy to do that via our online facilities, so it doesn't require you necessarily to come to SARS. In addition to that, the Minister has given a directive in line with the overall disaster management regulation that will permit taxpayers, traders, and practitioners to travel to their places of work and to engage with SARS for the fulfillment of their tax obligations as is required in statute. And so there's no lawful or practical reason from our perspective for you not to honor your filing obligations. When it gets to payment obligations, again, we ask you not to take the law into your own hands, but to use the relief measures as indicated by the Minister of Finance and engage with us in addition to the normal provisions in terms of the Tax Administration Act that allows for deferred payment arrangements and other arrangements that empathizes with your normal business challenges. And of course, during this period, we remain extra empathetic as far as this is concerned. So very clearly, honor the declaration and submission deadlines so we don't miss a beat on that, and engage us as is required in the relief measures or the ordinary course of the application of the Tax Administration Act for any other further relief. As far as the downgrade is concerned, I think I share the sentiment, and this is a sentiment with the rest of my colleagues in Treasury and in government, but also broadly South Africans. Whilst we understand the underlying factors that are pointed out by the ratings agency, we think that during such a time of crisis where the whole world is recalibrating and redefining its economic status, for any downgrades to be issued during this time is like kicking us when we are down. So if I am to advise or give a view, we think that for the foreseeable future, while we are trying to understand this, that ratings agencies should actually suspend those activities because the implication of the ratings downgrade forces many asset managers to act as a result of their mandates or stop losses. It unnecessarily increases the cost of capital at a time when we are already struggling. And so we just believe that this is not the time to engage in downgrades, but that's my sentiment, and I'm open to be challenged or questions on that. As far as the track and trace is concerned, you may recall when I arrived in May last year, I was concerned about a number of public criticisms around both the process that we had followed up until then, as well as the way we have narrowly specified what we wanted. But because I am not the decision maker, I stepped away from it and allowed the process to run. The managers who are responsible for that engaged in an independent review, and that has gone through a full governance process. And just last week, a recommendation was made to me, which recommendation I approved, and so I can announce officially that the current procurement process for the track and trace has been suspended, and we will reformulate and reissue one in the near future. Track and trace is an important instrument in our armour, because, as I raised before, it is unfortunately one of those areas where there is significant and ongoing areas of non-compliance and also criminal activities which we need to manage, which compromises the fiscus significantly from a revenue collection point of view. It is too important for us to proceed with something that is so profound and then it is criticized or has questions of its integrity. And so I accepted the recommendation of the committee that adjudicates that and have approved that we suspend the current one and we will reissue a new process when we have done the groundwork. I'd like to hand over to Johnson to talk about how we administer refunds and then also thereafter to Beyers on the customs relief measures and anything else Beyers or Johnson feel they would like to elaborate on.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think it's important to just indicate that since the lockdown started from the 27th of March until the end of April, we collectively processed to a tune of 22 billion rands refunds. Same period in the prior year, we had processed 25 billion rands in refunds. So in this period, we would have processed 3 billion rands less of refunds. And I think it's important that we stress the fact that, like all other organizations, we had seen a decline in resources availability to be able to process that work. Commissioner spoke about the decline in resources that were available during the earlier parts of the lockdown. We feel that the 22 billion that we've processed over the period is reflective of the hard work that the colleagues have put in. We are looking closely at our inventories in as far as what is falling into our inventory. And by this, Commissioner, I'm also answering a question that is currently sent to us on WhatsApp to say, indeed, whilst we process the 22 billion, we are closely concerned and are looking at the inventory that we have. And we have set up the brief that the Commissioner spoke about to look at the production levels across the inventory that we have in our books, with a view of making sure that nothing stays in the inventory for longer than it's meant to be, in line with our SLA arrangements. However, though, I think the key point that I'd like to raise is that in this period, 27th of March through to 30th of April, 22 billion rands of refunds have been processed. And same period in the prior year, we had processed 25 billion. And I think it's important for us to also stress the fact that we look at the inventory and we want to make sure that the inventory is processed in line with our SLAs. We are aware that there could be those refunds that might have ended up in the inventory, and we are closely looking at that inventory to make sure that we are aligned in terms of our service level agreement and our service charter, and we'll continue to do that work. Beyers is here from Customs. Commissioner, I'll hand over to him.
Maybe just before Beyers steps in, just on the refunds, the 22 billion. So in summary, what we said, it reflects the reduced economic activities. But I think I would also like taxpayers to appreciate that during this period, we had between 15 and 30% of our staff. And the reason we were able to do it is because of the sterling work that took place with our technology and data management teams, and using data matching and artificial intelligence, we were able to continue to keep the refund stream flowing, because we realize how many taxpayers and traders are in dire need for the cash flow that is paid out in the form of refunds.
Thank you, Commissioner. I like three particular areas, but before I get to the three areas of tax or relief from a customs and excise perspective, I think it's important to note maybe the significant decline in import transactions and export transactions in the lockdown period. Now specifically on imports, we've seen a 60% decrease in import transactions for the month of April. and for exports we've seen a 72% decline. So if I then talk about the specific relief that's been given in the customs environment, there's rebate provisions that's been issued by ITAC, the International Trade Administration Commission, and that is specifically to provide duty-free importation and VAT-free importation of all essential goods. Up to date, if you kind of look at the extent of the permits issued, we're talking about 61 billion odd in revenue, in value that's been issued. And out of that portion that has been used is already about 3.5 to 4 billion, which means that there's a significant amount of declarations that will be processed in the next month in terms of what is still lying within those permits, and they are still being issued as we speak. Now, the revenue impact, just on what if you look at what has already been kind of issued, the revenue impact from a customs duty and import VAT perspective is 24 billion in revenue. So the second thing that I would speak to is deferment arrangements. Recently, actually last week, the Commissioner established a committee, an interim revenue referral committee, which I chair, and the first set of first set of considerations that we had to do is particularly in the excise manufacturing world, where there has been no manufacturing in the lockdown period, and for which we have then, through our own rules, provided for a 90-day extension period in terms of the payment of excise duties. That same committee is now considering, some people in trade would be aware that we have published new rules in which we can consider deferment arrangements in the customs world, and that committee will, you can actually, if you look at the rules, it's been published for comment. You can find those rules on the SARS internet, and we would encourage that by the 15th is the due date for the comments, so we would encourage that to actually do your comments in terms of that. But we are also allowing for trade already in line with the conditions that is specified in the proposed rules to submit applications for the deferment of the customs duties for relief in that regard as well. So that's the areas, I think, Commissioner, that I would cover.
Thank you.
Commissioner, if you agree, I'd like to move on to the next set of questions.
Maybe just before you do that, Johnson, to say that, trade surplus is normally good news, because it means that your export activities exceed your import activities, and you're a net importer of money and a net exporter of money. It's good for foreign currency earnings. Except in our case, our trade surplus is not so much driven by a great export performance as it is by a significant reduced domestic economy, domestic consumption, which has also resulted in lower import activities. So whilst it is good to have a trade surplus, the underlying reasons aren't necessarily good.
The next set of questions come from the South African Institute of Tax Professionals site. And Commissioner, if I paraphrase, is actually Barbara Kessen. She's asking, will SARS hold employees liable for employer violations? For instance, where the employer does not pay over the pay-as-you-earn collective to SARS. I know the Commissioner addressed this point, but I thought I would just raise the question from Barbara. The second question from Barbara at site is, will SARS reconsider the implementation of advanced pricing agreements in relation to transfer pricing, as they will provide certainty for both taxpayer and SARS? And I think Barbara is aware of our strategic objective number 1, to create certainty and clarity. The last question from Barbara is, applying for the pay-as-you-earn deferral is on a case-by-case basis, and there doesn't seem to be an agreed streamlined process. She cites that different auditors ask for different documents, Is she then says this is time consuming. Is SARS considering improving or streamlining this process going forward? And Commissioner, I'll stop there from site's point of view, and we'll take the next set of questions. I'm aware that our meeting is scheduled until 4:30, and I may have to not raise some of the questions and then address them in our website conclusively.
That's fine. I also would like us to prioritize media questions at this stage. But very quickly, we will not penalize an employee for the non-compliance of the employers. It would be great, though, if you help us put a bit of pressure on your bosses to comply. And the reason for this is, while we will not penalize you, you still have a legal obligation to fulfill your obligation. And to the extent that your employers are not compliant, it just makes it harder for you as an employee. And that's why we need to work together as partners. But no, in law, we will not penalize an individual taxpayer for the non-compliance of the employer. We will deal with the employer separately. In terms of advanced pricing agreements, we are working hard. We have, in fact, reinstituted a facility within SARS to step up not just advanced pricing agreements, but all so-called leverage products, because it is our explicit strategic objective to provide clarity and certainty, and advanced pricing agreements, as you correctly point out, is one of those products that we will produce. In terms of pay-as-you-earn referral, I am not sure what the specific question relates to, but you're welcome to take this offline and to see how we can help you.
Going further in terms of the questions, FIN24, the question is not signed, but it's from FIN24 to say FIN24 has received complaints that the SARS Alberton call center has been made to work at 100% attendance on Monday, the 4th of May 2020, with no social distancing among staff members. Is it possible to have a comment on this particular matter? Pelele Zula from Business Reports newspaper. I'd like to ask SARS, what would the revenue impact be of the estimated 3 to 7 million job losses that are estimated by National Treasury? Surely if more taxpayers lose their jobs, the more companies close shop, SARS will collect even lesser revenue. The question from Finweek, do you have any estimates at this stage of the loss of economic capacity likely as a result of the lockdown measures? Commissioner, I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. Very quickly on the Alberton call center, that sounds like a mischievous report. Some employees are lazy. They don't want to come to work, and they will find whatever excuse they can to not work. So let me put that out there very bluntly. We are committed to ensure that social distancing measures are in place, that we adhere to public health measures, and we have invited our employees and our colleagues in labor where we have teething problems to point it out to us, and we will step up to ensure that. We have also said to our employees that where we as an employer fail to give them the assurance of the public implementation of the public health measures, the social distancing measures, as well as the occupational health measures, that we will not force them to work. But there is a concomitant obligation on staff where and when they are required to work to do so ethically and honestly. So this is a contract of mutual obligation. But thankfully, I want to say that the majority of our staff have been wonderfully supportive in our offices, in our branches, but you will always find here and there someone who tries to make virtue out of misfortune. I am reliably informed that today the staffing level at our Alberton call center is 67%, and that all social distancing and public health measures are adequately in place. I also pointed out earlier that we have had 3 visits from the Department of Labour. I'm in direct contact with the Director General of the Department of Labour to help us and to make sure that we interpret the requirements correctly. We have an internal COVID task team to keep me on my toes and to make sure that we abide by that. As far as the other 2 questions with revenue estimates and economic capacity, we have shared with you initial and tentative numbers. As we develop this, we will report further. And as I said, I'm not in the business of revising revenue estimates. We will work with our colleagues and finally with the Minister of Finance, who has the final authority to adjust any revenue estimates.
I'll raise the next 4 questions. These are last questions from the written questions that have been sent to us. Boniswa Mohale, a journalist, is asking, does SARS have a unit that monitors illicit tobacco trade? Is there a number that the public might call to report anyone selling illegal or illicit cigarettes? The second question is, how much does SARS lose per day as a result of the ban on cigarettes and tobacco and alcohol sales? The next set of questions, Ed Stoddard from Business Maverick is asking, how concerned are you, Commissioner, with the sin tax losses? I think it's the same question to a great extent. The question from Claire is what are the, she didn't say which media house she comes from, what are the reasons the NCC to prohibit the sale of alcohol and cigarettes despite the 1.3 billion loss to the fiscus? How does SARS hope to recover from a revenue shortfall under these situations? I'll stop there, Commissioner. The other questions that we've not gotten to, we will take it on and answer them.
Thank you. So first of all, I think Claire is from Business Day. Thank you, Claire, for answering one of the questions posed by Bongiswa and the question by Ed, which is the revenue loss of 1.7% on the 1.7 billion just from those 2 so-called sin taxes. But I have to point out, whilst we are concerned about the revenue loss, the real reason why we are flagging this is because it is our perspective from the anecdotal evidence that we have that cigarettes are still for sale, alcohol is still for sale. I've shared with you, we have had a number of detentions, a number of interruptions. We are currently dealing with 4 matters with the South African Police Service that involves illicit cigarettes and alcohol. So we are not raising this necessarily only because of a revenue impact. We are raising this because illicit trade and criminal economic activities is a scourge which undermines not only our revenue collection, but which distorts our local economy and robs South Africans of honest, hard employment opportunities. We cannot allow criminals to continue to thrive in our economy, and sadly, when we have the misfortune of COVID-19, criminals use this as opportunity to practice their trade. You know, I am often known to say that circumstances does not make us, circumstances merely reveals us. And that is true for honest people, but it's also true for dishonest people. Claire, in terms of the NCCC question, I have made the point earlier today when we addressed Parliament, and I make the point again today. When Cabinet makes a decision and formulates a regulation, as an honest civil servant, I implement them. So I do not raise them because I necessarily object to the decisions that are made. I raise them because I would like to point out the implication of those decisions, both on revenue collection, economic activities, as well as the unintended thriving of illicit and criminal activities. Which brings me to the last question, which is the first question which Bongiswa asked. Yes, Bongiswa, we do have a unit that manages two streams. The one work stream is criminal and illicit activities in the tax sphere, and secondly, criminal and illicit activities on the customs and excise sphere. They work together because very often there are cross pollination and cross activities, and this is about understanding the syndication of criminal activities better. It requires a different set of skills, a different orientation, and this unit works very closely with the South African Police Service, with the National Prosecuting Authority, with the SIU and other enforcement agencies. And we are slowly building and increasing our capability in this unit, but they also work very closely with our growing, ever-growing capability to do data management, artificial intelligence, so that we are continuously better able to detect and to respond to areas of criminal non-compliance. Thank you.
Maybe Commissioner can add that there is a anti-corruption hotline that we have, 0800 00 2870. And on our website, we've got capability to be able to raise suspicious activities that the journalists can note by visiting our website. I will hand over back to our program director to wrap up.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks to the Commissioner for SARS, Mr. Makubu and Mr. Pero, for providing all the clarity and answering those questions. And now we'll give an opportunity to, clearly the members of the media present in the House do not have any further questions. So ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, SARS team and family, this comes to the end of the press conference, and thank you so much for being a great audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bongi.